Hey everyone, NanMan here. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know that you can listen to this in the podcast form over on iTunes or on Spotify, pretty much anywhere that you can be able to find podcasts. But we've also put the audio up on YouTube, up with kind of a leveling of the new starting zone Exiles Reach. So if you want to kind of check out what that looks like while the episode is on in the background, you guys can be able to check that out. But without further ado, let's jump into the episode. To kind of get things started into kind of our intros, we'll at least start by kind of figuring out, okay, what characters do you play? How many max levels do you have? All that kind of good stuff. And being the most casual player of WoW now, because I used to be hardcore years ago, I've switched to being casual. I only have one max level character in retail, and it is a druid. So that's the balanced druid, I guess, boomkin style. And that's what I've got here. So at least kind of our second up on kind of the introductions will be our kind of returning guest over here telling us the millions of max level characters that he's got. Jaime, why don't you kind of take it away with the millions of characters that you have at max level?
Yeah, that's fair. I do have quite a few. So in retail, I actually have 4 characters. I leveled a druid first and almost immediately swapped over because I wasn't enjoying it. So I have a druid, a shaman, a paladin, and a DK. And in classic currently, I have a max level rogue and a max level warrior.
So it's safe to say that you play a lot of WoW.
It is
Some
very
would
safe
say
to
the
say
most amount of WoW.
I would say that as well.
All right, guys. All right. Come on now.
Well, since you were just chiming in there, I think that is fitting that you kind of, as our resident classic player, at least tell us what max level characters you have.
Everybody here, other than you, plays classic, so it's not like I'm the only one that plays.
But you beat classic, so...
Okay, I have a max level warlock and a max level warrior.
In retail?
No, in classic. Sorry. I have a max level mage in retail, but I play extremely casually in retail.
But you're more classic focused. Okay. All right, so that means Nick or Silvar, you're our last one up here for are you like close to Jaime in your max levels or closer to okay.
I'm like the middle of the road between Zach and Jaime here. So I've got 2 max level characters in retail, an affliction warlock and an arms/prot warrior. And then for classic I have a mage and a druid at max level. So
Excellent. Cool. So shifting gears a little bit, at least to the classic stuff, I guess we can at least start with kind of leveling in classic, because we started our kind of retail talking about leveling and stuff like that. And some of you guys have multiple characters that are max level and stuff, which, you know, I guess it's easier to get all up there when for a time there wasn't all this rating stuff, right? Nax wasn't out for a while and all that stuff, so a lot of people were like, well, I'm playing classic, I might as well just start leveling a second character kind of thing. So like, how was that leveling experience? Was it like you remembered back in the day? Does it feel different? Like, you know, I remember when people started posting, everyone was like, oh my god, this game is broken. It's like, nope, that's working as intended. You guys just don't remember how the game worked.
I'm a little skewed on it because I played private servers for 4 or 5 years before classic actually came out, so I did the leveling experience multiple times leading up to it. During then, that was like a good nostalgia trip, and it felt like it did back when we first played it the very first time. I think classic felt, as far as leveling goes, at least how it did back then as well, back in 2004 to 6.
I don't remember ever having anything of a shocking of like, well, this isn't working how it intended, and it turns out, well, I feel like everything lined up to how I thought it would be, honestly.
And I was like, I personally like classic leveling, so I mean, I know I do. No, I was saying I do. Yeah. I kind of like the grindy, like slower paced leveling. You know, you get 1 talent point here and there, kind of thing. You get your spells every 2 levels. I don't know. I know some people don't like it, but I personally do.
Yeah, I prefer it, honestly.
Jaime, any thoughts on classic?
Yeah, no, actually, believe it or not, I do enjoy aspects of the leveling in Classic. I think part of the reason too that how it's a little bit different for us here is we've played it before, so it's like that nostalgic going back and we've done it. For someone like Nick who is playing private servers and Zach who has kind of that knowledge of the Classic base as well. I mean, it was a little bit easier for them to get into it and know where to go, what to do. For me, it was definitely challenging at first because it was just it is definitely the leveling aspect of it is definitely a lot harder. It's not like it is in retail where it's like, oh shit, I feel like playing a monk this week. It's like you just go in the dungeon and you just grind out the dungeons until you figure it out. Here, it's like you make a mistake, you're gonna die, and you have to run all the way to your corpse. It wasn't. And even when you ran to your corpse, it was, oh well, you're gonna spawn in, on top of all the mobs. You have to like plan the leveling a little bit better.
Not only that, you had a unique experience of you tried to play Classic like you play retail, and you leveled 3 characters to like the 50s before you finally picked one to cap.
Yeah, and that's painful to
I was like, that just
at a later date.
That just sounds like your WoW experience, though. Like, doesn't matter whether it's retail or Classic. You're like, I just need to just figure out what feels right for me. And even if I get 3 characters to almost max level, until I find that character, I'm gonna grind.
Yeah, which I think it was only punishing in Classic. Doing that in Burning Crusade will actually feel better. Like that. I think Burning Crusade will hit more what you're looking for, Jaime, because you'll be able to do Kara every week, do heroics, the daily heroic, and you'll have the ability to go hit all those different classes and everything like that. And because there's badge gear, you'll be able to continuously progress even if you play those characters infrequently. You'll have the ability to play multiple characters, I think, depending on how much you want to play, of course. But
yeah, and that's the other thing with Burning Crusade for me. I know we're talking about Classic, but for Burning Crusade, that's really when I went deep into the raiding aspect of the game. So, I raided Serpent Shine Cavern, and then I raided Kara, and I even raided some of Black Temple when the content was current on my warrior, tanking it. And I really enjoyed it. It was hard. It was challenging. It felt fun to do it, and even the PvP of it was fun. So I still think a lot of people will side with the point that Burning Crusade was probably the best expansion Blizzard ever released. I lost my train of thought here.
Good talk. So, I mean, since we're on rating, why don't we refocus it back to Classic, though? Zach, I'll kind of have you kind of take the reins of this and at least explain what raids existed in Classic and what that raiding experience looked like kind of leading up to Nax, and then we'll kind of devote it to just to Nax afterwards.
So the way that they did it is it's like in Classic, Molten Core and Onyxia were available at launch, and then like they separated it into different phases. Like eventually Blackwing Lair come out, and then eventually AQ is going to come out, and then eventually Nax. So each different like phase, you had like the main raid to focus on and everything like that. And I don't know what else you.
And that was still 40-man raids. And
yeah, so like Molten Core is 40-man raid, Onyxia is 40-man, and then they did Dire Maul, which is just like another like thing that hit along the phase, but it's like another step of character progression. There's different gear and enchants and trinkets and spell books and like varying degree of things that you can get in there. And then the next major raid to come out is Blackwing Lair, which is also 40-man. And then ZG comes out after that, which was 20-man. And then AQ, which is 40-man and 20-man. And then Nax, which is 40-man.
So how, like, Onyxia and Molten Core and stuff like that, initially you had to do 40-man. Did it ever get to the point where you didn't need 40 people to do those, or just because of the way Classic designed the gear level that was capped at, there was no way that people could do it really with less than 40?
You definitely could do it with less than 40. And there's some that are, like Onyxia encourages you to do it with less if you can. Like if you can split your raid and do Onyxia with 2 20-man groups, like that's the better way to do it, to just try to speed up what gear you can get.
Even when that was like the current patch raid or like
Yeah.
phase raid kind of thing. Like you could do Molten Core with like 35, 30,
Yeah.
somewhere in that range if you really needed to.
The only time I've ever
Rag
felt
might be a little bit hard though, because that
Yeah.
would be a bit of a DPS check. But
the only time I've ever felt like having 40 was definitely where you wanted to be was Nax. Even in AQ, I felt fine being 38, or sometimes even a little lower if like it was just a particular night where a lot of people weren't there. But Nax, I always feel like, and that we don't have the problem filling 40 people anymore, but Nax is definitely one of those where I always want to have 40 people.
The one thing I will say, I can briefly chime in because I'm not as experienced in Classic as Nick and Zach is. I will give them credit in terms of the tier gear and the gear that you would get from particular raids and such. Did feel like it kept its value longer than it does in retail. So like you could essentially get full tier 1, full tier 2, and they still have their uses even going into tier 3 for different types of content, different things that you were doing. Once you got a piece, there's more value in that piece that you get. And once you kill a boss and got it on farm and people were farming particular pieces, once you got that piece that you wanted or you needed, it was going to stick with you for a while. So there was that reward system of really getting what you wanted, grinding for it, and then, getting to use it for an extended period of time instead of, oh shit, I got this last night. And then the next night you run 10 more dungeons and you replace that piece.
Yeah, like a good example for casters in Blackwing Lair, which is the second raid that came out, which was in February of last year. There's a trinket off of the last boss called Nel's Tier, and it is the best in slot trinket for all of Classic. It doesn't get replaced in AQ or in Nax even. So if you get that, that's like a thing that you just never have to worry about for the rest of the game's lifespan, basically. And that's something that, unless I think there's like a few things in Burning Crusade, like the Dragon Spine trophy off of Gruul might be the only one that's good, like for the entire expansion. But like they moved away from early on best in slot pretty quickly. But like in Classic, there are definitely things like in AQ, there was another, like I can get bracers that were best in slot for the rest of the game. There's definitely a couple things along the way that I could get that I would just never replace. That was a pretty good feeling.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Is like in that early feeling to be like, oh, well, now I'm set. I don't have to grind this a bunch of times for it. I can still play it because I enjoy doing the raids and stuff, but I don't have to sit here and stress of like, oh my gosh, am I going to get something that's going to replace this or not? So that makes sense. So with all these raids that you've talked about, has there been one that you're like, I have had the most fun running this particular raid?
Maybe Nax, if it was the one I wanted to see the most, and I feel like the guild kind of finally reached the best that it's been all expansion. I think there are definitely still weak points. There are still players that, if I was in charge, I would have kicked out of the guild already, but it's not. But there were times where, like, I think it has to do with how the guild, like the points that the guild was at and things like that, where I didn't want to do certain raids and things like that just because I felt like they were harder for the group of people we were playing with at that time. But like I was saying, Nax feels like the best point of the guild that we've been at. So that's maybe why it's the most fun. I would say AQ is probably the least. It was Blackwing Lair, but because like the bosses really are not fun to do.
Not forgiving.
Like, the theme of Blackwing Lair I really like, and like the lore of it and everything like that, I really like it. But the bosses are like not fun. Like from a DPS point of view, there's so much threat wiping randomly, and like it's just like not a fun boss, like, or not a fun a raid to go DPS in. And AQ, the trash is so unforgiving, and so it's almost always harder than the bosses, and I don't like going into AQ.
That makes sense.
AQ is that thing that I had to do to go to Nax. So
yeah, you had to take those steps to be like, all right, I've done my time. Get me to the fun stuff now.
Yeah, but I like everything that I did along the way had varying degrees of grinding and rep grinds that I had to do and things like that to make sure I could get best in slot pieces and make sure I had gear and or consumables for raid and everything like that. Like I raided a lot in Legion as well, but even then I didn't have to do very much outside of raiding, and I really like needing to do all these extra steps all the time to be able to raid. So I think that's why I like Classic so much.
That makes sense. Nick, Jaime, what about you guys with like the stuff? Like, was there? I know that you guys aren't still rating and you haven't done Nax stuff, but did you do any of the stuff early? Then you're like, oh, this feels good doing this 40-man stuff or anything like that.
Go ahead.
No, go.
For me personally, I actually really did enjoy Molten Core and Blackwing Lair. I agree with everything Zach has said. Blackwing Lair does suck complete ass to DPS because if you didn't watch your thread or you crit a bunch, you literally would have a boss turn and breathe on, take a breath on the entire raid, or and our melee weren't necessarily the brightest, myself included. So that stuff would melee cost a lot of wipes very, very often. I really enjoyed Molten Core. I just liked the feel of it. I enjoyed getting to go and see the content live. The bosses were kind of fun. It just seemed like a good, fun intro raid, and it was enjoyable. I actually quit right as we were going into AQ because I didn't want to do the grind that you have to do to get it. That you need. Yes. To do. Exactly. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to see Nax. It would have been cool to see Nax live, or current, I should say. But
touch on what he's talking about is there are not really so much in Blackwing Lair, but coming AQ, there are bosses that you need to grind. You need to have full, if not maybe not full, for melee full resistance sets. So Jaime needed to get a set that was like 200 nature resist or something like that, and you have to go run older dungeons to get gear drops. You need to farm up crafting materials to craft certain pieces, and you need to farm a ridiculous amount of consumables to have like nature protection pots and things like that. And that extra like aspect of grinding outside of raiding, I think, is what always put Jaime off. And I think as soon as he hit that point in Classic, he was pretty much done, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's funny because it goes back to that whole point of, regardless of which version of the game you're playing, it is somewhat a bit of a grind, right? So I wasn't okay with doing the grind to get to the next step of raiding, which is still a grind no matter how you look at it. But I'm sitting here grinding mythics like it's nobody's effing business. So it really comes down to what you want to do in the game. And I was, I used to be of the thought, oh, retail's better, blah, blah, blah. No, it really comes down to what people want to play, what they're willing to commit their time to, and understanding that you're going to have to grind in either game. You're going to have to give that time commitment. There were just some things, like in this particular example, I just didn't want to put the time in to be able to do that next step, but I'm okay with doing something else in a different version of the game. So that's just definitely the point I want to get across is, regardless of which version you choose to play, it is grindy either way. You just have to choose how you want to grind and what you want to experience.
Makes sense. Nick, what about you? What's your classic raid experience like?
I thought that MC and Anixia were actually like some of the best content at the start, like when you first fresh 60 and stuff. That just felt like some of the best like raid content, as far as like, your character's fresh, you're getting all these cool epics and stuff, or you're seeing all the good loot dropping and stuff, and you just want a little piece of that, loot to make your character feel so much more powerful and stuff. But I also really liked a lot of the BWL fights, actually. I know from maybe a DPS perspective, it might not have been as much fun for some of them, but towards the start of BWL, I had to switch to a healer from my mage, so I went from mage to a druid. And that was kind of, I guess, refreshing to actually have a different perspective for raiding too. Because then when we went back and cleared MC and stuff, it was like kind of a new aspect to like learn, kind of understand how to play from the healing perspective instead of just doing DPS. But around the end of BWL, my guild fell apart, so I didn't really get to do any of the AQ stuff. or knack stuff, at least in Classic. I did a little bit of AQ stuff on the private servers, but I didn't get to do it really in Classic too much because also around then, got a new house and everything. So
real life catches up to you.
Real life got in the way of getting back into a guild and getting in the swing of things. But yeah, I think at least at the start of Classic and stuff, doing MC like in the first couple of weeks of like your character capping and stuff was always a really fun experience.
I mean, you brought up something that I feel like was commonplace, is that guilds falling apart. And, it might be due to, hey, we need to get 40 people or 38 people or whatever, or the couple exceptions of the 20 people together to run this. And just like getting that many people to be ready, hey, commit to it is like super, super hard. But I don't know, Zach, Nick, you guys might be able to speak a little bit more. Nick, you were in a guild that fell apart and stuff like that. But Zach, you're still in guilds and you've seen guilds fall apart around you.
Yeah, a lot of guilds. Problem, there's like a lot of different like varying degrees of what'll cause guilds to fall apart. Like if you hit like a particular point where if like everybody, I'd say even if Classic fresh servers come out, if it's been long enough since you've played it, the idea of doing the 1 to 60 and doing MC and maybe maybe Blackening Layer a couple times still is probably intriguing enough to do. But then once you get to the next step of rep grinding, protection gear, resist gear grinding and things like that, maybe that's when you stop playing. So if like, for example, if guilds hit the point towards the end of Blackening Layer where they start to lose several people and then don't like recruit enough, and then they go into AQ and they're having to like do it with 36 people, they might not be able to do it, and then it falls apart for those reasons. Or of course, everybody's favorite reason, loot drama causes guilds to fall apart. It's lots of different things that'll really screw everything up. Thankfully, our guild was able to continually recruit along the way, and we were able to do all of Classic, even carrying some people that aren't particularly good and it's their first time ever playing WoW, but still got it done, still got 15 out of 15 in Nax, so it's really good.
That was part of like my guild's issue was recruitment, because the original GM to our guild kind of tarnished the guild's name enough that when we had all new leadership for like the entirety of BWL, basically, we weren't able to recruit new people because the guild had like such a bad like standing on the server with other people that our GM from the original like leadership had burnt too many bridges with like all the other guilds and stuff. So that's like one aspect of like community matters a lot in Classic, and
server reputation.
Tarnishing your server reputation, especially your guild name reputation kind of thing, can really screw your guild in the long run.
Yeah, I actually kind of thought, it was pretty bad like how it was for your guild, because we played on one of, especially at the peak, one of two, if not the most populated server. So I kind of expected Nick's guild to overcome the problems and find people that didn't hear about, like his guild's problems. But it was bad enough that everybody knew who Nightmare was.
I will touch on one quick thing about the reputation and all these other things. I will say, and tying it a little bit back to retail, but still keeping it on Classic, I've found the Classic community to definitely be more welcoming, definitely more tolerant of things. I know part of it may have been because they were looking for more players and they kind of wanted to keep that roster, and whatever the reason may be, right? But still, even so, when I was pugging with people, when I was doing puggable raids, like the smaller raids, the 20-man content with random people, you may have a bad encounter, but I think people were a little bit more worried that if you're on a server and people started to know you as an asshole, they're not going to pug with you. So they kept their mouth shut, or they were a little bit nicer than they would have been otherwise. In retail, it's a complete opposite, especially in the Mythic Plus community, the pugging community. It is a very toxic environment. People are very elitist. People are quick to jump to putting people down and eating someone alive. So I really do miss that element of Classic, where you are tied to that server. So if you are an asshole on the server, people are going to know that, and eventually you're either going to have to leave the server or you're going to have to quit the game because nobody's going to want to play with you. In retail, it's the complete opposite. It just, you get what you get when you pug, and it, sometimes it's good, most of the time it's bad.
Yeah, I won't even pug in any aspect of the game, basically, unless like I absolutely have to. But like, I will join a guild and run with them, or I will only do Mythic Plus with you guys or people in the guild. Like, I'm not interested in joining and playing with random people and just having them screw up whatever I'm trying to potentially do at that time.
That makes sense. So, any thoughts, last thoughts about Classic before we kind of get into kind of rumor mills and talks about an expansion and stuff? Overall, Zach, would like it, because you have essentially beaten Classic at this point, right? You said you've done 15 out of 15 for Nax. You've done all the rating. You've done everything. Essentially, you might be wanting like a couple pieces of gear here or there, but like you've done it all now at this point.
Other than PvP grinding, which I didn't really get to do, well, a lot of it's like half and half. Not wanting to do it because of just how much the pug scene was for it. Because PvP for me was always just randomly queuing into battlegrounds and just kind of going around and messing around on your character and seeing what it can and can't do. But it's not. It was never going to be the same the second time around, because the whole idea was to grind the honor system, and like the best way to do that is to like do pre-mades with people. So I'd say every other game or you'd probably hit a pre-made 3 out of 5 times that you queued into battlegrounds, and that's, I mean, the pre-made is just going to completely stomp over your team. So that kind of made PvPing not really as interesting to me. But Classic was everything that I hoped it would be, and then more some. Like I think it was, who was talking about it? It was like S-Fan, I think, was talking about it, because he played a lot on private servers as well, and he said the second time around for him when he played on private servers, like the first time was when original vanilla came out, but then the second time he played it again, everything was more fun and more enjoyable. And I thought the same thing. Every time going back through this time was even more fun than the first time I played. And I think it will be the same if they continue to do, Burning Crusade and Wrath of Lich King, like it's likely that they're going to do. But it's so much fun to me that whenever they do Classic fresh eventually, as long as it doesn't line up with Burning Crusade, I will go and play and do the level grind and do it all again from a different character and do it from Alliance point of view and things like that. It's just that much fun. I would do the whole basically 1.5 year grind all over again.
All right, so the Classic Fresh that you referred to is just basically they wipe everything again and be like, all right, it's Classic 2.0 essentially.
Yeah, there would be some things that I'd want to see changed. Like I'd like to see the batching window. Like they're changing batching for going into Burning Crusade most likely, and making that not a problem. They basically introduced, in case you didn't know, something called batching to make it play as if you would have been playing back in 2004, to add like delay on your spells and everything like that. But it didn't do anything other than make the game feel worse. Honestly, you could cast a heal, but because they added that extra delay window in there, your heal could go off, but it wouldn't register healing a tank or other people. So there'd just be random deaths when your heal goes off and you've had the mana taken from your character, but it didn't register on that person, for example. And you could kick something, but because it got batched, the spell still goes off and kills you, and things like it's just, there were things like that made the game feel pretty bad. And if they don't get rid of that for Classic Fresh, that would definitely put me off from playing. But other than that, like that, I would definitely play it, and it would likely be. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was going to say, experiencing that in raids, especially as a healer, like you see your heal physically go off on the tank. You see the green animation of him lighting up, getting healed, and then he drops dead because the heal was spell batched and the damage came in first from the boss, kind of thing. And it's just like, oh my god.
They've already put on the PTR to get rid of it, because you pretty much, if you're going to have Burning Crusade come out and there be arenas, you can't have spell batching. So
yeah, it was funny because when I was raiding with Zach and everybody, it was like, quote unquote, the running joke where it was like, oh well, tank's dead, there's the spell batching again, because like 6 healers had fucking set off their heal and it all got delayed, so it was really stupid to have a wipe because of that when everybody was doing their job and performing at the level that's expected. So there was no real point to it, and it really did kind of demoralize a group if they were getting ready to kill a boss and then batching fucking killed the tank, and there goes the wipe. Because in classic, it's you have a couple tanks with threat, but it's very easy to wipe once your main tank dies.
Yeah, just to not get away from what you originally asked, though, like whenever a classic fresh would happen, it would basically be them picking a date whenever it's going to be, and they'll just relaunch brand new servers with you having no characters and nothing on it whatsoever, and they say, okay, go through the cycle, play the game again.
Makes sense. So, there's rumors at this point about Burning Crusades, like when it's going to be released. We know it's coming. Like at this point in time, it's like kind of a foregone conclusion and it's coming out. But if a player that did not play in Classic, hears about this, oh, okay, they're going to be doing Burning Crusade. When is the time that they should start getting ready? Should they start playing Classic now? Should they wait for okay, it's coming out on this date, so you can wait even until the game is released and then start playing? Like what should players kind of expect as this sort of kind of speculation phase, because we don't have any information at this point yet?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that could come into it. If it's like a completely fresh server dedicated to Burning Crusade, then literally nothing that you do now is going to matter.
Right.
But what I think they'll probably do is either character copies or character transfers. And then if that's the case, then you'll want to basically level up a character of your class choosing to 60 on the classic servers and have them prepped and ready to be transferred over to the Burning Crusade ones. Get as many like gold and mats and stuff, whatever they're going to let you take over. But again, that's all speculation based off of what Blizzard decides if and when they come out with like a Burning Crusade server, if they're going to allow for a character transfer, or if it's going to be everyone starting fresh yet again on like a TBC patch server, though. And I mean, that's all just stuff that we're going to have to wait and hear about.
Yeah, and a lot of it's going to depend on what you want to do in Burning Crusade as well. Because like if you want to play a paladin on the Horde or a shaman on the Alliance, there's no point playing early anyway, because you won't, and like until they announce how it's going to be done, you won't be able to play either of those until the game officially launches anyway. So there's like you can't really do anything other than farm gold beforehand. But even then, because gold has been so inflated in Classic, there's a chance that they cap how much you can take into Burning Crusade to begin with.
That makes sense. So is there one of these that you guys would prefer? Because I feel like all three of you will be playing Burning Crusade. So is there one way that you hope that they would do?
I think I would prefer just like a character copy so you can keep your classic character. But I think they need to limit like what kind of stuff you can take over and how many characters maybe you can copy. I know that might be unpopular, but I think the amount of gold and stuff that could get influxed from some of the bad botting practices and stuff that Classic had that I can hopefully have cleaned up for TBC.
Blizzard failed
into some way.
Exponentially on bots, honestly.
I need to step out real quick, so I'll be AFK. Sorry. I know
I think we're like pretty much done. I think that was the last kind of topic of point, but that's all right. If you need to duck out at this point, we'll just kind of do one last wrap up about our thoughts on Classic and stuff like that. So, thanks.
I'd say
Nick.
I'm pretty 50-50 on, maybe not 50-50, like 75-25. But I'd say I generally would rather them say Burning Crusade's coming out and you just get to transfer your characters over onto there. Mostly because I put as much work as I have into them, and I've done things already to prep for Burning Crusade, like work on leveling a priest because I'm going to be switching to a Shadow Priest. And I also have characters that will be used exclusively just as profession bots, for lack of a better word, that they're going to do nothing but have max level professions that I just use cooldowns on to like craft certain things just to help like generate gold and everything like that. But I also wouldn't mind if they did a complete fresh server, only because I really like the starting from scratch aspect. It's also why I like the idea of playing fresh Classic. Like it just like encourages you to play more, and it will encourage more people to play more. I think so. I think it's just nothing but good for the game. But I think people wouldn't want to give up what they've already like put in time wise for the characters they currently have.
Yeah, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I'd say I would be okay with each of the options. I think I agree with Zach 100% about having put in time to your classic character and being able to move that over, even if you just hit max level before the expansion, or being able to just carry it over. I mean, you've leveled it that far. You have what you have on it. Carry it over. The other thing is in Burning Crusade, you have shamans being introduced for Alliance, and then paladins are introduced for the Horde. So that would be another thing for me where it wouldn't really affect me too much, because I've considered playing a paladin. It'd be warrior paladin for me. I would say, to the original question you had asked about when to level, I agree with everything that has been said thus far. I will say, quote unquote disclaimer, when it is announced or when there's a date, and even if it's 4 or 5 months out, give yourself ample time, especially if you're more on the casual side, because it does take a hefty amount of time to get from 1 to 60. You're going to want to do a bunch of things. You're probably going to want to explore content. You're going to be new to the game. You may not have as much time. So it's not like retail, as some have played, where you can spend, like a tenth of the time, get to max level, and then grind out that way. It is going to take a decent amount of time to get to level 60 and prep for the expansion, whatever option they end up doing, right? Obviously, wait until the announcement is made and there's maybe more of a definitive date around it, but give yourself ample of time, whether you're hardcore or not, because you're going to want that extra time to be able to feel like you're enjoying at least what's left of Classic and the leveling experience, versus trying to rush all the way to it just to get ready for BC.
Yeah, the best way to do it, I'd say, is the virtual BlizzCon is February 19th and 20th, and everything that you're going to need or want to know, you'll know then. So like that's like the best time to really see everything that they announce or don't announce, and then approach it fully at that point.
Nice. That makes perfect sense. All right, so I think that's like at least it for this episode. We'll probably do another one like at least after like the virtual BlizzCon, like you talked about, so we have more information and we can kind of talk more about things. And then, maybe there'll be new stuff that has happened in the game that we can kind of highlight and discuss at that point. So thank you guys for at least coming on and chatting with us. I know it was kind of a little bit longer, and we'll probably have broken this up at least probably into 2 episodes at this point because of how long each one was, and just one dedicated to retail, one dedicated to Classic. So thanks guys for spending all this time talking to me. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Always fun to talk about WoW.
Amen.
Nice. Hey everyone, NanMan here. I'm a StarCraft 2 and Magic the Gathering content maker and commentator. Thanks for tuning in and watching, guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and check the description for more information about other content that I'm doing. I've also got a new podcast, NanMan's Nerd Corner, which you guys can find out on Spotify or iTunes. It's got a bunch of Magic content as well as other stuff. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys next game.